We're all here to talk about stopping aging. And here is a 25-year-old who actually stopped a little while ago. So this is what stopping aging is about. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. For starters, I have two questions. First of all, because I need to know I'm in the right place, who wants to stop aging? Anyone? Does anybody want to stop aging? Yes? Okay. All right. Good. Good. The second question is, who would like to live life as though they were 20 or 30 years younger? Anyone? Then I'm not the only one. Okay, great. And I just want to make sure the 20-year-olds in this room did not answer that question. It's not about magic, but we can stop and even reverse the effects of aging. And in a little bit, I'll explain what I mean by that, because there are different definitions of what aging actually is. But before we can even go into that, what I like to do is address basic misconceptions and myths, because once we hold on to myths and misconceptions, which are very common in our culture, we are actually halting any potential progress. So no use talking about principles and concepts unless we know some of the most popular excuses and myths. Let's start with some of these reasons, or as I say, excuses to avoid exercise. I'm sure some of you may have heard someone say this at some point in time, if it wasn't actually coming from your own lips. No time, no money, no interest, no energy, too old. I love that one. Thank you. As far as no time, that's okay. Would you mind going to mommy? Okay. Okay. He wants to take my position. That's the next seminar. He's taught me everything I know. So as far as no time, I need to know, does anybody watch TV ever? Does anybody watch TV in a 7-day cycle? Does anybody surf the net? Does anybody go to a Broadway play or socialize with friends? Some people keep raising their hand with every one of these. How about spending some time on the phone to do that wonderful gossip that's not really helping life per se? Okay. Well, the point is, it does not take a whole lot of time. It does not take a whole lot of time to burn calories, and it really does not take a lot of time to condition the body to a point where you can actually start to reverse aging. And I will, again, elaborate on that. As far as no money, how much do you think it costs to buy a jump rope? $5? $10? Then there are these giant Dynabands that could actually fit into your pocket. They cost maybe $1 or $2. Well, how about just wearing the shoes you have on right now and going outside? How much does that cost? And how long does that take? In fact, every client I ever had for the 22 years I spent full-time in the health and wellness industry, I always told them it's so simple, especially on days you don't have time to go out of your way to exercise. Get off the bus one stop early, or the train, or get on the bus one stop later. It's not that hard. Now that's in terms of the aerobic capacity. So actually, can you take him outside? I'll see you soon. As far as no interest, I feel that ties in with what happens when you don't get into it, because the less you exercise, the more uncomfortable it becomes. It's kind of like Newton's law of motion. What law is that? An object in motion tends to stay in motion, right? And an object at rest tends to what? Stay at rest. And the most active people stay active all through life. I could think of 2 examples right now. I'm sure you all heard of Jack LaLanne. Has anyone heard of Jack LaLanne? Yes? Okay. Now, unfortunately, he did pass away not too long ago, but folks, I have news. No one leaves this world without dying. So at some point, we have to go. But how he lived his life to the very end is what inspires me. Vitality, not just of the body, but of the mind. He was doing seminars, he was doing his infomercials on the juicers. How many people do you know at 96 could function optimally like that? See you later, Nicholas. And as far as no energy, that also ties in with the concept of when an object in motion stays in motion, an object stays at rest, same thing with energy. Because as we move, we actually regenerate energy. It's kind of like a battery in a car. If you don't drive your car for about 2-3 months, what happens? The battery dies. But guess what? We have that same type of mechanism within our body. And I'll just go into a brief little sample within my own family, because people always talk about how it's all genetic and has nothing to do with our own choices, which I dispute. I've done a lot of research on this. But even anecdotally speaking, both my parents are still alive, thank God. My dad is 84, my mom is 80. Now, when I was first starting out with life in my preteens, my teens, and through my 20s, both my parents were equally strong relative to their gender, physically, emotionally, mentally. My mom chose to be very active, playing sports, lifting weights, doing aerobics, very positive attitude. My dad, on the other hand, the eternal pessimist, chose to sit in his couch and do the all-American pastime of couch surfing. Well, as time passed, their age difference started to spread to a point where now my mom is still out there playing handball. She belongs to 4 bowling leagues. She goes to the gym 3 times a week and power walks 5 times a week. And my dad cannot even get up from the chair. He's got beginning stages of dementia as well as Parkinson's, which is directly related to the lack of exercise. See, when you exercise, guess what? The blood flows not just to the working muscles. Guess where else it flows? To the brain. Thank you. And there is no other direct way to prevent, even reverse, brain disorders like Alzheimer's and dementia than through exercise. Reading languages are great, doing crossword puzzles are great, as well as learning new languages. But nothing, no single thing in life can actually enhance brain function the way physical activity can. So we need to start moving. We were designed to be in motion. And then too old. I have a friend who looked at me and said, look, you're attached, I'm attached. We're getting older. We don't need to exercise anymore. See, he was thinking from an aesthetic standpoint. He was set in life. He already trapped someone, I guess, to stay with him for life, for lack of a better phrase. But the thing is, we were both 30 when he said he was too old to exercise. And now, for me, that's 22 years later. Don't do the arithmetic. But this guy really can barely move. So it's important that we start to dispel some of the myths and especially the excuses we come with. Now, in my book, Stop Aging, Start Training, I do start off, chapter 1 is all about myths. I don't have time to go into it because I have 20 minutes to share what I learned in 22 years. And that's not going to happen tonight unless I speak 2,000 words a minute. But one thing that irks me the most is when people, again, blame it on genetics. Now, if you do not exercise, if you don't watch what you eat, if you do not rest, if you do not watch how you intake things, if you smoke, if you drink, then yes, you are relying on just one possibility. And you better hope that you chose your parents wisely. Because you only have that one thing to hold on to, and it's not going to matter all that much. But as you start to add more elements, you will dilute the need to rely on just genetics. As you start to exercise, you start to perform certain activities. And I'll give you one example. My wife, by the way, is from Japan. But there are studies on Japanese people who emigrate to the United States. Now, just talking about Japan itself, the Japanese culture, women in Japan have the lowest breast cancer rate in the modern world, in the industrialized world, until they moved to the United States. And within one generation, their breast cancer rate equals that of their American counterparts. And by the way, Americans rank like number 15 for women and 18 for men in world ranking in terms of longevity and wellness. And Japanese women needed just one generation. Now, if it was genetics, would it matter what soil they're standing on? The Italians in Italy, with the olive oil that they eat and the more active lifestyles that they live, obesity is so limited there. But yet, if you look at the Italian-American communities in this country, it's different. And again, I ask, if it's genetics, then what did it matter that they were born in the USA and not back in Italy? So we have to start to rely less on excuses so that we be more inclined to take action. Exercise is only for young people? Well, we'll talk about that. Strength training is only good for men. I hear that all the time. Women are so afraid of getting bulky and looking like Arnold Schwarzenegger's twin. It's not going to happen. to look like that, first of all, you have to have the same level of testosterone as men do, and women do not, I assure you. And secondly, even if you are a man inside, you'd have to start taking a lot of unhealthful substances to get to the sizes of those bodybuilders. Now, I lift weights a lot, and I could still move. I could still scratch my back and so forth. It's how you train. It's how you eat. And by the way, women do need strength training more than men. That's the biggest irony, because men do it for aesthetics, but they generate all the positive benefits as a result. Women who are more susceptible to osteoporosis avoid the single most profound form of exercise that directly will stem or prevent osteoporosis. And then we have a few others. We'll go into this another time as far as common myths. You could ask me a question during the question and answer time. As far as aging, and this is why I always tell people that it is in fact possible to stop and even reverse aging. Now, if we're talking about number one, chronological aging, then you would need a magician or talk to the man upstairs, because there's no stoppage of time. Time just keeps marching forward. That's what chronological aging is about. You start at point A, the day you were born, and from that day onward, you start to age from day one. But if we talk about biological aging, I refer to that as relative aging, because your biological aging is dependent upon how your cells are aging, which depends on environmental variables like the water that you drink and the air that you breathe. And by all means, if you really want to live a truly healthful lifestyle, I suggest moving up to the Himalaya mountains, drink just spring water, and live a long life. But for me, if I'm going to be bored counting trees and leaves, well, I don't mean to criticize that lifestyle, sorry. But the point is, to really capture all the elements is very difficult, but we do have a lot that are in our control, from the amount of water that we drink. And of course, Lisa brought up many very, very good points about how to substitute healthful living for the unhealthful options that exist all around us. So biological aging, how do you live your life? How does that affect your body? Now, we all know the answer. It's no secret. Diet and exercise, right? We all know that. But that's where the problem begins. That's where the confusion starts. Your medical doctor tells you, you need to exercise more. Great. What do you mean by that? Oh, just go outside and start moving. It's a bit more complex than that. There's a lot involved when it comes to exercise. I have a whole page in your handouts on the effects of aging, but the number one point I want to point out for this session is that muscle mass and strength starts to decline by the time we are 30 years old, and it starts to diminish about 1% per year. Our muscle tissue breaks down at a rate of about 1% per year. So by the time we're 40, we lost 10% of our muscle mass. By the time we're 50, we lost 20% of our muscle mass, and so forth. But it doesn't have to be that way. You see, when we lose muscles, then we start to have a slower metabolism. And when we have a slower metabolism, we accumulate more fat. Excess body fat is not so benign. It's actually a storage site for carcinogens, which means we then become more susceptible to cancers. And also, particularly when we deposit extra fat around the midsection, that affects our insulin uptake, which means we become more susceptible to diabetes. And the list goes on and on. In a nutshell, when we start to lose our muscle tissue, and I'm not talking about aesthetics and being bodybuilders, I'm talking about being a normal human being as we were designed to have strong muscles. As we start to lose it, we set ourselves up for too many possible ailments. And so for healthful living, I like to quote George Bernard Shaw, because too many times people say, as I mentioned in an earlier slide, some people say, oh, I'm too old to exercise. Well, we have to realize that we don't stop playing because we get old. We get old because we stop playing. We've been looking at it backwards. And a major marathon runner had changed it just a little bit. We don't stop moving because we get old. We get old because we stop moving. And that's exactly how we're designed to be. So therefore, the magic formula is not that hard. It's exercise and physical activity, plus eating right and a positive attitude. And that's what allows for healthful, youthful living. Now, at the bottom of the screen, I left out 4 blanks because I was going to write it out, but I lost my clicker. I can't have it appear. So I'll tell you right now, you may want to write it down. The 4 main components of fitness. First 2, most people are familiar with. What would one be? A main component of health and fitness. Aerobics. Everyone knows to go out and run. Marathon running became popular in the 70s. We had Jim Fix, who started the marathon in New York City. There's aerobics. Then we know about flexibility. Flexibility, very important. Many yoga studios have opened up all over the city. Now, I have to talk about the benefits of each style of exercise, but there's flexibility as the second component. The last 2 involve muscles. One is muscle strength. Muscular strength is an important component of fitness. And then there is muscular endurance. Now, those last 2 are a source of confusion when people choose a method of exercise. A lot of people who used to train with weights and do aerobics now say, I don't need to do that. I do yoga. Now, yoga is phenomenal, and I encourage all my clients and acquaintances to do yoga. But when people start to say, that's all you need, that's a big mistake. No one modality of exercise should ever replace all the others. The human body is way too complex for that. Now, yoga is ideal for relaxing, for flexibility, and yes, for muscular endurance. But too many people get confused between muscular endurance and muscular strength. Those are 2 discrete components. One is not the same as the other. Now, granted, when you have a stronger muscle, the endurance of that muscle is enhanced. But when you have a muscle that has greater endurance, it does not necessarily translate to increased strength. So a yoga practitioner will say, but I could hold the poses longer and longer. But guess what? The word longer lends itself to what? Endurance. While it's a shock to a newcomer, any new form of exercise to a body is enough to stimulate results and progress. But there's a point where the body adapts and strength will start to plateau and maybe even diminish if that's all that you do. So I love yoga, but you have to incorporate strength training somewhere into your lifestyle, because in the modern times, we do too little to challenge our muscles. Now, I'm not quite sure how old yoga is. It's at least 2,000 years old. I can assure you at the time that it was created and devised and modified, life was a bit more vigorous. You wanted water, you had to go to the well and fetch a pail of water or go to the river. You wanted fire, you had to chop wood. Now you just turn a dial to turn up the heat, just get a little container of water or pour it right out of the faucet. There's no resistance. We need to do something to challenge our muscles. And that's where strength training comes in. And that's why I like to elaborate on the 4 components of fitness. Now we know about aerobics, strength training, flexibility, and in a separate category, physical activity. And I keep that separate because I recall many times working on the gym floor when I would ask a member who I may not have seen for 2 months, I'd ask, where have you been? I haven't seen you in the gym. Oh, I've been playing basketball. In the summer months, people tend to do outdoor activities more. People rollerblade in the park. They play volleyball. So they think that basically replaces the need for strength conditioning. But it does not. It's a separate category altogether. Aerobics, I'd like to elaborate on that just through the images alone. I'm sure you can all figure out aerobics is any steady state form of activity, anything that you're doing in constant motion. Even if I were just to stand here and start marching, or even just running in place, if I do this for the rest of my presentation, I'll get winded and someone would have to resuscitate me. No, that won't happen. If that happened, then I'm not practicing what I preach. But aerobics, anything that's continuous in motion, which involves the uptake of oxygen. It enhances your aerobic capacity. It's the single best form of exercise for heart and lung health. And it also enhances muscular endurance, but not muscular strength. Okay, so let's keep that in mind. Ideally, 5 to 7 times per week. Why? People think, well, I did it already a week ago. Let's just remember the basic premise. The human body was designed to be in motion, just like the car battery I mentioned earlier. 5 to 7 times per week. Doesn't have to be in a gym. I have the cyclists up in the upper left-hand corner. I've got on the lower right-hand corner a structured exercise class. And then I have an image above that of an exerciser on a rowing machine. But there are many options. Like I said, when this session is done, go outside. Walk 2 train stations before you get on a train. And if you live across the street, then why not walk to the Empire State Building on your way home? And then always vary the intensity, because if you do the same level, I've seen people doing the same level of activity, same level of intensity, day in and day out for years and years. Guess what? In their first 2 or 3 weeks, it was shocking to the body and they generated a lot of results. But after a certain period of time, if they keep up at that pace, the benefits do diminish. So you have to vary the intensity, and then it's good to alternate forms of exercise. So if you're used to getting on a bike machine or do spin classes, vary it. Go on a Stairmaster, go out for power walks, and again, challenge your muscles in a whole variety of ways. I like to talk about strength training. That was the main focus of my conditioning for all my clients, because aerobics is so easy. At the end of our session, I would tell my client, go on a treadmill or walk home if they live 20 blocks away, which, by the way, is equivalent to 1 mile. But strength conditioning, at least do it 2 times per week, 3 times if you're a beginner. 2 to 3 times is pretty much the range. If you're more of an intermediate or advanced level, then you have to break down the workout into a more complex way, which I won't go into today, but 3 to 4 times per week. But when you get to that level, you could actually shorten your workout, because instead of doing a whole body routine, which could take an hour, you just break it down. So today you do upper body, tomorrow you work on lower body. Or today you work on chest and back, and tomorrow you do arms and shoulders. There are ways, and actually the workout intensity will increase, but the time frame that you're in the gym will shorten, which is what people love to hear. And 3 basic tips for strength conditioning. Always work the larger to smaller muscles, which means if you're doing chest, you're also working your shoulders and your triceps. Think of support mechanisms. And if you fatigue the triceps, which is the back of the upper arm, which most women complain about, if you train that first, that will interfere with the development of the primary muscle, which relies on the smaller muscle. Large muscles rely on smaller muscles for support. So always follow a sequence. You're not going to understand that in the next couple of minutes, but just understand that concept and you will be prepared to ask questions. If you belong to a gym, ask a trainer or Google it, but there are ways to find the right sequences for exercises. And always rest your muscles. Never do the same muscle group more than once every 48 hours, because muscles do tear down and they need time to recover. And incidentally, on that note, where muscles need time to recover, whereas aerobic exercise burns more calories per minute than any other form of exercise during activity, strength conditioning burns more calories per hour subsequent to exercise. You alter your metabolism in ways through strength conditioning that you cannot do through aerobics, through flexibility conditioning, through yoga, through any other form of exercise. Because here's what happens. As you lift weights, As you're lifting weights, you're tearing muscle tissue. Over the next 24 to 48 hours, they need to mend. And the chemical processes that go on after going through that muscle tear down, which is actually a good thing, doesn't sound like it is, but it's ideal. The chemical processes actually require a lot of energy from the body. And as you start to increase muscle density, your body works harder to maintain muscle tissue. So it is beneficial all around the clock. And always make sure you breathe properly. There's a correct way and an incorrect way. Always remember the phrase, exhale on exertion. Exertion is when the weight moves up against gravity. So if I were on a bench, let's say, about to do a bench press, as I press up, I would exhale and then inhale on the return movement, because it's on the positive, on the upward movement, that we always need more energy. Therefore, exhaling gives us that power. So breathing is a big variable as well. And then, of course, flexibility. Always warm up first. I've had a lot of dancer friends. I worked out of a gym for many years over on Broadway near the theater district, and many times we had dancers come in, they'd get on the floor and start stretching. And I would ask, did you warm up? And their answer was, I am warming up. Warming up and stretching are 2 different forms of activity. Warming up literally means warming up your core temperature. And in order to do that, it is recommended that you do some form of aerobic activity, whether it's on a stationary bike, jump rope, walking in place, for 6 to 10 minutes. Then after warming up, maybe do a general stretch within your healthful range of motion, because I've seen a lot of people hyperextending joints, people doing a cobra, trying to bring the head back to their butt, it seems, which serves no purpose actually than to try to look impressive. Avoid extreme movements and avoid bouncing movements. Bouncing, jerking type of movements. I think you've all seen. Now, I admired Jack LaLanne. I have all my life. He was an inspiration for me. But some of his exercise methods were old-fashioned. So if you want to look at him, look at what he was like in recent years, fine. But if you look back when he was in his 20s and 30s, the exercise methods then are totally contraindicated. So if you see the old-fashioned way like this, bounce. Oh, my back. No, it's easy. That bouncing movement is contraindicated because actually you send a signal to the brain indicating that there's a threat to the structure of the body, and ironically, the reverse happens. Brain not distinguishing between an intended stretch and an accidental pull. Let's say your arm got caught on to something. The brain not distinguishing between either of those scenarios, the body will tighten up to protect itself. So when you go into the bouncing type of stretches, you're actually causing more tightness than flexibility. And then I have a page on all the benefits of strength training. And I really wanted to expound on this because this is the one form of exercise that seems to be overlooked, neglected. In the 80s, though, when I was first in the real estate, actually I used to be in real estate, then I switched to fitness, and I 2 years ago went back to real estate. But I still do this. I still know my stuff. I have several clients on the side, but the thing is I need to explain that during the 80s, strength conditioning became really popular, especially for women. And then we had rebounding classes, we had step classes, and again, yoga, which I love, came along and people erroneously made the mistake, erroneously decided that that replaced all other forms of exercise. And I think that strength conditioning needs to be brought back to the forefront of all exercise regimens because, again, a stronger muscle will lead to stronger bone density, because muscles are attached to bones via what we call connective tissue, meaning ligaments and tendons. So it's not just the muscle that gets stronger, but it's the muscle, the bone, and everything that is connected in between. So if I'm doing a bicep curl, in order for me to move this part of the arm, the bicep is attached to the forearm. So not only am I developing in strength my bicep, but I'm also developing the tendon that's attached to the bone and the bone itself. And so a whole series of other variables, elevated metabolic rate. I'll show you with the cursor here. So here we have increased connective tissue, which is what I was just talking about. You have thicker bone density next. As a result of thicker bones and muscles, you have elevated metabolic rate, therefore improved muscular endurance. And with improved muscular endurance, you could exercise aerobically better and develop your cardiac function. And by the way, even if you didn't do aerobics, and I'm not saying you should not, we all need to, but even without doing aerobics, when you strengthen muscles, guess what? The heart is a muscle too. And unlike aerobics, which expands the chamber of the heart, which allows more blood to flow in and therefore lower blood pressure, with strength conditioning, the wall of the heart gets thicker. So with each contraction of the heart, there's more blood flowing through the body, thereby allowing a lower blood pressure, lower heart rate. So there you have it. People who lift weights do end up having lower blood pressure. Now, during the actual activity, you will raise your blood pressure by all means, which is why we need to exercise in gradual increments so our bodies adapt. The body's a highly adaptable system. And then as a result, as I just pointed out, you have lower blood pressure, lower heart rate, improved mental well-being because blood is flowing to the brains more efficiently because of stronger muscles. It's been documented through a variety of medical studies that your good cholesterol rises and your bad cholesterol declines through strength conditioning, and therefore a stronger, younger existence. There have been studies that have shown that people who needed walkers and canes and crutches to be mobile through strength conditioning programs actually reached a point where they no longer needed any form of assistance. And for me, that's what is meant by reversing age. It's not a number, it's how well you live your life, which is why I always look back to Jack LaLanne. All right, he died a little early at 96. I actually expected him to be at least 120, but all right, so I was a little disappointed there, but I love his vitality. And what about Bob Del Monte? Has anyone ever heard of Bob Del Monte? No one? He was the fitness trainer for Errol Flynn, Marilyn Monroe, and John Glenn, an Apollo astronaut. He was a top trainer. And if you saw, I would highly recommend you Google his name. His first name is Bob. His last name is Del Monte. That's D-E-L-M like Mary, O-N-T-E-Q-U-E. You'll recognize him. Many of you would have seen his image. He had a full head of white hair, but a six-pack of abs, strong muscles, right until his last day. And all my heroes are passing away. But again, you look at the vitality. This guy was in his 80s and jogging down the beach. He was doing seminars, traveling the world. Again, full of vitality. It's quality of life. I list all the types of exercises. So this is in your handout, although if you want, you could get a copy of my book. It'll be in more detail. Here's what I meant by physical activity. Physical activity basically means any form of activity like playing basketball, playing tennis, even a brisk walk outside. Doesn't have to be considered exercise per se. These are all forms of physical activity. You could do it outside. You could go to a roller rink. They're fun. You're exercising, you are burning calories, but it's not a regimented form of exercise. So there's no way to really monitor, are you doing it more intensely than you were 2 years ago? So we need a structured form of exercise and then an unstructured form, which always, again, should be fun and should be done on a regular basis, if daily if possible. Now, of course, we have a very good nutritionist in our presence who just spoke, so I won't go into this too much. But the things I like to point out to all my customers, all my clients, are to eat 4 to 6 times per day. I'm not saying to eat more calories. I'm saying to take the number of calories that you're eating and divide it into smaller, more frequent meals. The irony is when people want to lose weight, what do? They eat 1 meal a day. And what they end up doing is killing their metabolism. Each time we put something in our mouth, we actually elevate our metabolism. The body goes through a whole series of processes to break down the food, separate what we need from what has to be eliminated, and the whole process could take anywhere from 2 to 3 hours. So every time we eat food, our metabolism comes up, and about 3 hours later, as we digest the food, our metabolism comes back down to baseline. Now, if you skip a meal and you don't eat for 6 or 8 or 9 hours, your metabolism goes past baseline and goes down into the basement. So when you do have that one meal, let's say for round numbers, 2,000 calories, your metabolism is down here, you're taking in 2,000 calories, and there's no way your body could process those calories efficiently. Now, if you had 4 meals of 500 calories a day, per meal, then every time your metabolism was about to come down, you consume some food, you bring it back up. And it never quite will slow down to a point where it could actually sabotage your efforts. So eat 4 to 6 times per day. Definitely breakfast. I agree with Lisa. Breakfast is perhaps the single most important meal. I've read in various studies that what you eat within the first 1 hour of waking up will set your metabolism for the rest of the day. So trying to cut out breakfast is actually working against anyone who wants to lose weight or stay lean. And then I put down a basic balance between carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. I believe in what would be a high carb, medium protein, and a low fat diet. All the high protein diets, they're great for losing weight, but guess what you lose? You lose water. Carbohydrates retain water. So if you go on a low carbohydrate diet, you lose water. Guess what muscles are made of? 70% water. So if you're in a dehydrated state, you will absolutely lose weight, but muscles, and eventually bone density. So who wants to be lighter if they're fatter anyway? Because then we have to start talking about body fat composition, not body weight. Another variable I like to use with customers or clients is what we call the waist to hip ratio. Measure your waistline, measure your hips. If you're male, the ratio should be no higher than 95%. Worry about how the equation works at another time. But just remember, measure your waist, measure your hips. And for women, the ratio, healthfully, should, and again, everyone's genetics, bone structure is a little different. But in the range of 75 to 80% for women is ideal. And then I go into samples of proteins, but Lisa did a good job with that. Samples of carbs, complex carbs in particular. Simple carbs get processed as sugars, which affect your insulin, so we don't want to do that. Now, how do we get to exercise? How do we get ourselves to be motivated to no longer live a sedentary lifestyle? I believe in role modeling. Find people who inspire you. It doesn't have to be famous people like I mentioned, Jack LaLanne, for me, Bob Del Monte, but people who live healthy, vibrant lives, people who are fit. And visualize yourself. I believe in the power of visualization. Again, I work in real estate. Every morning I visualize my day. It's a tough business. And by the way, I just want to mention one thing. Now that I've re-entered this form of work that I used to do, the fitness principles and the nutritional principles that I've learned and taught and implemented into my own life help me to function so much better in my business. I work in a high-stress business. It's highly competitive, and it does require a lot of strength emotionally and physically. A lot of my listings are in walk-ups. Now imagine going up and down showing a fifth-floor apartment 10 times in an hour. Now my competitors start to conk out, they slow down, so they might show that same apartment 2 or 3 times in an hour, and I'll do it 10 times in an hour, I don't care. Go back to the office, I can still focus. And why is that? Because my body is not fatiguing as much. And so for whatever walk of life you're in, whether you're a medical doctor, whether you're an accountant, whatever it is that you do, whether it requires physical strength or not, it will only help you to keep your body fit. A fit body does enhance and allow for a fit mind. So visualize yourself, and we all heard about SMART goals. This is nothing new. You can find this online as well. But in the world of fitness and health, specific goals. For instance, on New Year's Eve, a lot of people say, my goal, my New Year's resolution is to lose weight. Okay, now what? Be specific. I want to lose 2 pounds. Okay, how will you do it? I will lose 2 pounds by joining a gym and going twice a week and walking 4 times a week. These are specific goals. Have them measurable. Take tape measurements. Weigh yourself, but don't rely on that too much. Attainable. I've had many people approach me saying that they wanted to lose 10 pounds in the next week. Is that attainable? Well, yeah, they could cut off their left arm. They'll lose a few pounds. Does it mean they're living more healthfully? I'd say not. But the thing is, you want it to be attainable. And here's a note on the topic of weight loss, since that seems to be such a main concern for people. Again, I hate using that phrase, weight loss. I like to talk about fat burning. But in the category of weight loss, the healthiest amount of weight, does anyone know what that is? Does anyone know what is the maximum healthful weight to lose? The amount, 2 pounds per week. 2 pounds per week is the most. Because once you start to lose more than 2 pounds, it's almost impossible to lose more than 2 pounds of fat per week. But once you start to lose 3, 4, 5 pounds, people have been very successful losing 5, 6 pounds in a week. Absolutely. What they don't realize is that they failed health-wise because they lost a lot of water, muscle density, and a little bit of fat. So if you're greatly overweight and you need to lose 50 pounds over the next year, no more than 2 pounds per week, and allow your body to adapt metabolically. You need to be realistic, and you need to be timely. Timely meaning, again, you don't want to lose 5 pounds in 2 weeks. Maybe over the course of a month is more reasonable, and more healthful over 2 months. 5 pounds in 2 months. That's a lot of weight change, but you'll feel so much better. Your body will adapt in many ways, energy-wise, in terms of your joints, in terms of your metabolism. We don't want to kill our metabolism. Metabolism is critical. And so I always, as I mentioned, you don't have to rely on celebrities. Here are 3 role models I've had. First, on the lower right-hand corner is a friend of mine. At the time this photo was taken, he's one of the models in my book. Paul was actually a retired teacher at that point, 64 years old. very active. He rides his bicycle many miles a day. He lives out in Bayside, Queens, so he rides out to Jones Beach, from Queens to Jones Beach and back, just as an example. The woman on the lower left-hand corner, at that point in time that that photo was taken, was in her upper 50s, and she keeps herself very fit. She attains her level of fitness primarily through strength training. In fact, I had to nudge her in the direction of taking yoga and doing aerobics to balance it out, because I don't believe in, again, just one style of exercise. I talk about don't do just yoga, but I'm that way as well with strength conditioning. Can't just lift weights. Can't just lift weights, can't just do aerobics. You need to have that balance. The woman on the upper left-hand corner is my mom, and that's when she was 75 years old, playing handball. For those of you who are familiar with handball, handball is a lot more vigorous than tennis. When I want to have a lazy day, I play tennis. But when I'm feeling energized, I play handball, because you use both hands, you have less reach, a lot more running around, you need quicker reflexes. So here she was playing handball while my dad sat on a park bench behind the court just watching, trying to keep his eyes open. So, for me, it was a simple choice. I saw optimism, strength, and vitality, and I saw pessimism and slowing down and sluggish, dozing off, not really enjoying life. When I used to tell people how I like to exercise and eat right, people say, oh, that's boring. Well, I look at my two parents, one who lived the so-called fun style of eating cake and whatever else, and the other one who was more regimented in her lifestyle. And you know what? I'll take that active lifestyle. My son was born when I was 50. And a lot of my counterparts, I was talking to a colleague of mine today back at the office, and I said to him, you know what, I'm shocked when I talk to some of my former classmates, because we start talking about children. And as I talk about my child, they talk about their grandchildren who are in the same age range. So, but you know what, it really doesn't matter, because I will take the steps and I go out of my way to stay as youthful as possible. The only problem is if my son does the same thing that I did, if he waits till he's 50 to have a child, I will be 100 when I'm a grandfather. So I will have to train very hard all my life. And I do believe in quotes. I believe in a lot of sayings. And the one thing I like at the very top is our health always seems so much more valuable after we've lost it. So you know what? Let's take preventative steps. It doesn't take a lot of energy. Break your workout down into small little chunks of energy. Even 15 minutes at lunchtime. If you belong to a gym, just go to the gym, choose one muscle and target it, hit it hard, and go home. I like Goethe when he says, take care of your body with steadfast fidelity. The soul must see through these eyes alone, and if they are dim, the whole world is clouded. Now, the Buddhist monk, the Zen monks from thousands of years ago practiced martial arts, not to hurt people, but to enhance the clarity of their mind and their spirit. Everything is interrelated. Our bodies, our minds, and our spirits. We've become such a cerebral society that we've scrapped phys ed programs. We would rather give up exercise and sit in a park and read a book while there could be tennis courts right over to the side. Reading is great, but enhance your mind and take care of your body, because one will enhance the other. An enhanced mind will not develop a strong body, but a strong body will enhance your mind. And I love this Mahatma Gandhi quote. Some of you may have heard it. Well, you all heard of Mahatma Gandhi, I trust. But this is how it goes, real fast. Your beliefs become your thoughts become your words become your actions, right? Isn't this true? What we speak about is what we end up doing. Your actions become your habits become your values, and your values become your destiny. People say, oh, I was destined to be heavy. Oh, I was destined to be slow. I was destined to age. No, because in a nutshell, in one sentence, what this quote is saying is that your beliefs become your destiny. So start to believe that you can be younger. Believe that you can have time to exercise. Believe that eating healthfully will have a major impact on your lifestyle. And just start taking those baby steps. And like Jack LaLanne, like Bob Del Monte, and many others like them, you will live each day of your life with the vitality that most people think is reserved only for 20-year-olds. And so that's my message. Thank you.